that Jesus calls great. Great faith. So he's just dealt with a leper, right? And the leper should not have shown up, but the leper felt bold enough to show up because he said, "You're the Messiah," which is not that many people recognize that. So the leper had already put himself in a good position, and Jesus recognized that, and he said, "I will." And he says, "If you will, you can." And those are two important concepts: God's ability and his willingness. When you have both of those working together in you, then faith is released. Sometimes we think God wants to, but he just can't fix that. Does that, we look at a problem and well, that even God can't fix that. You would never say that out loud, but certain things just seem unfixable. So we give up on them. Other things, we know God is able, but we just wonder if he's willing. And since we're wondering if he's willing and wondering if he's willing, we can never release our faith because what if he doesn't want to? And that'd be like standing outside someone's door and I wonder if they want me to come in. As long as you'll never walk in as long as you're wondering. And faith is that step of, I think they want me to come. If you go ahead and walk in. Faith is thinking this, I'm the able and the willing go together. So the leper said, "If you're willing, I know you're able to do this." And then he says, "I will." And that's all the leper needed, done. Before Jesus could lay his hands on him, he was already cleansed. So then he runs into the centurion. We were reading this, and we'll just go through this quickly to remind ourselves what happened with the centurion. So
now when Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, pleading with him, saying, "Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed, dreadfully tormented." And Jesus said to him, "I will come and heal him."
Done. So at that point it was done. So the centurion, he's Roman. He's not Jewish. He doesn't have any right to ask Jesus to do this. He doesn't have any right to think Jesus would do it. He knows he's able to do it, but didn't think he would. So my servant, and Jesus said, "Okay, I'll come and heal him." "Oh, you're willing to?" "Okay, done." It was done. I know you're able, and now you're willing. So that's why he stopped him. The centurion answered and said, "Oh, go on."
The centurion answered and said, "Lord, I am not worthy that you should come under my roof, but only speak a word, and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority, having soldiers under me. And I say to this one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it." When Jesus heard it, he marveled and said to those who followed, "Assuredly I say to you, I have not found such great faith, not even in Israel."
So we're going to talk about great faith and how faith works. I've never heard it taught totally correctly. There are some people who teach that nothing can happen unless you have faith. And yet there were times when Jesus healed everybody. Like everybody who came up with healing. And there were also times when everybody was touching him and only one person got healed, the woman touching him with the garment. And there seems to be times when faith is required, and there seems to be times when God is merciful and it doesn't matter. Does that make sense? Whose mother? Somebody's mom was dead, and Jesus touched her. I think was it Peter's mother-in-law? Maybe. I know Peter's mother-in-law was sick, so maybe then somebody else was dead. But obviously, if you're dead, you don't have a lot of faith because you're dead. And yet Jesus touched her and she was healed. So was that her faith? It seemed to be his mercy, right? So sometimes God's mercy is enough. You're totally beat down and you can't, and God's just merciful and delivers you out of the situation anyway. It's not like you walk around praising God, right? So there are situations where it's mercy, situations where the faith is required, and then situations where God has not spoken to your heart, but you've decided to exercise the faith muscle. So I've heard people just standing in faith for things for years, but God never said that to them, so it's not going to happen. But they're doing everything right. So it's not just, I believe it and I'm going to be positive. It's not just that. It's responding to something that God speaks to your heart. And when he does it, it's then believing it. So, salvation works that way. People sit out in the congregation, and Jesus will save you. The preacher's preaching, or the song, how it's going out, the word's going out, and someone sits there and they're being touched by it. But then it's believing that if I go forward, that it will happen to me too. So God is always calling us, and then it's us believing and then acting on it. That's when our faith takes place. But if he hasn't said anything to you about that particular thing, you can't just faith it in and make it happen, right? Okay, so I want to look at different.
You have a question?
No.
Okay.
I gotta speak.
Yes, sir.
But I had open heart surgery.
Uh-huh.
I believe God is gonna heal me.
Uh-huh.
And I'm laying there. The doctor's saying, well, you can't move, you can't do this.
Here's a question.
I can do that.
Right, because God has told something touched you and you just knew.
But I can do this. You're gonna get up and you're gonna walk.
Right.
2 days, I'm up walking.
Right, and everybody's mad. You shouldn't be doing that, but you knew.
Yeah.
So if God speaks something to your heart, and it doesn't even have to be, thou shalt be, it doesn't be like that. Just something, because the woman with the issue of the blood, she said within herself, if I touch him of his garment, I'm going to be healed. God dropped that in her, right? And then you just know. But then you have the choice, you're going to believe what that's telling you, or are you going to believe everybody else in the world who says, no, that's not going to happen. So then you have to believe it. But I do know people who believe something and they're being as positive as they can be, but it's not going to happen because God didn't say that. They made that up. And they didn't make it up because they're evil or it's just what they wanted. And the scripture says, who can, in Job, who can say a thing and it come to pass if God hasn't said it? It's not gonna, if God hasn't said it, it's not gonna happen. So it's believing the word he puts in your heart, and he'll do it very faintly. But that's what faith is. But there are times when God is just merciful, and the person doesn't have faith, and it'll still happen, right? So you don't want to teach. If you don't have faith, it will never happen. But you don't want to also teach depending on God's mercy. You just hope, So anyway, we want to. But the faith that he called great is the faith that gets it and doesn't need a big sign or a big, like I say, it doesn't need organ music and all that. It doesn't need all of that. Not that organ music's not evil. In order to know that what God says, that's it. Period. It doesn't matter. Like he spoke to your heart. The doctors are saying no, and family members are nervous and no, you got to be careful, But I do too. I said, God has spoken to him, so you guys need to relax. But even when the world says that's crazy, and you got to have something in you that you believe. So, and it doesn't. And it's not like an angel appeared. And an angel could have. It's like an angel appeared at your bedside. I said, you just knew. And you didn't need anything dramatic. And so that's the faith that Jesus called great. Like, this is. But even little faith and great faith, at least it's faith. Either way. So here's what faith is not. Mark chapter 6, verse 4 through 6.
But Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own country, among his own relatives, and in his own house. Now he could do no mighty work there.
And that's just so interesting to me that he literally couldn't. Like he couldn't. I got it. He could. So that's interesting. Because apparently what God was requiring at that time was faith. There are times when people can be, Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief, and God's just merciful anyway. But in that situation, God determines, this is a situation where faith is required, and if there's no faith, I'm not gonna do anything. And sometimes God determines, I'm just gonna be merciful and do it anyway. But in this situation, it says he couldn't do any mighty work. Jesus couldn't do anything, because nobody believed, and that's what God was requiring at that time in order for that to happen. So he could do no mighty work there. Go on.
Now he could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. And he went about the villages in a circle.
So when he says, I have not found this great faith, not even in Israel, this is what he was contrasting it with. Just in my own hometown, they didn't believe a word that I said. And I grew up there. That's my brother. That's my family. And they're not believing me. Like, it's amazing. And yet the centurion comes in and he says, oh, I get it. I totally understand how this works. When you say it, it's going to happen. So if God says it, that's it. It's done. So unbelief obviously can stop God if that's what he's requiring. And I've heard formulas taught, like, here's the way to get everything that you want. Just say this, we believe you receive it when you have it, and then you'll have it. And that's the formula. And so, because there's a scripture that says when you believe you receive it, you'll have it. And so, with taking it total out of the context of everything that had happened, that sounds like, so the trick is just pray. So people would pray for a Cadillac, and I believe I received, and they just say, I believe I received it for 30 years, and never showed up. They went to heaven believing they received something they never had. And I'm not saying you should not believe you receive. I'm just trying to say God needs to speak it to your heart in whatever way it happens. Because when you had your open heart surgery, how did you know? What did it feel like? How did you know it was going to be successful? Can you describe it?
What? That he have something for me to do.
But how did you know that? Was it an emotion that came to you, a thought that came to you?
We were doing the morning breakfast, right?
Right.
And so then, through that process, my tithes and offerings, he had told me to take that to feed. So, that's what I was doing.
Right.
And so then, when I did, I just believed. I did, and the nurses tell me, you can't go to that bathroom. I said, yeah, I can go to the bathroom. I'm getting up, I'm going to the bathroom.
Right.
Bathroom right over there. So I'm going in there. Then after that, then he told me, well, get up and walk. And so then I said, okay, I wanna walk. And they had harness on me and stuff, and I was kind of off balance.
Right.
But then I walked. And then each day I increased the walk.
Right.
More and more. Because he told me that you can go farther than this, go around the corner.
But so does it come to you in words, or is it an emotion that you feel?
In my spirit, I just feel it. I feel it.
Okay.
What he says to me.
Right. Right. So that's because if that girl was here, she'd be so upset. The one how do you hear God? And it's hard when people say things like that. It's hard to explain how God talks to each person differently.
Right.
But he does, and I want everybody to know that you are hearing him. But you think it's supposed to sound like this or something. So you don't think it's him. But it's just a knowing on the inside. Sometimes it can be an emotion. I will feel emotions, and I'll simply describe what I am feeling. If that makes any sense. I'll see someone, and I'll just, here's what I'm feeling. I don't get words. Some people get words, like a sentence will pop into their head.
Right.
Or, but you want to wait until you know that God has spoken it to you. Then it's going to happen. You don't have to make it happen, you don't have to sweat. You do have to believe it, but that's all. And if you don't believe it, you won't get out of that bed, or you won't go through that door, or you won't do that thing because you don't believe it. And so your unbelief can stop the manifestation from happening because you're not doing the thing that somebody would do if they believed it, you know? God says, I've given you that job. You never go to that place.
Right.
It's like, I don't believe that. So you're slowing down the manifestation of that. Now, eventually, if he's spoken it, you'll just walk into that person maybe 20 years later, and they'll say, oh, you know what, I have this job, I've been trying to get a hold of you for 20 years. Because if God says it, it's going to happen. But you could have, and go, oh man, I could have called that person, and we've done that. I should have called you last week, or something told me a year ago, And so, but something told you, and that's when it happens. On the other hand, there are people who, they just want something to happen so desperately. God has not spoken to them, but they think it would make sense if that's how it happens. This person is going through whatever they're going through, and it would just think, well, surely God wants to fix it. But you don't know what God wants. Like in all these cases, he was like doing so much for his family. And they had to learn to do some stuff for themselves. That they were too dependent. This person is going to rescue me, so I can go out and do whatever. Because Grandpa Ollie will just show up and rescue me. And so God said, well, I'm going to slow you down for a minute. And he's going to have to do less, and that's going to force these people to do more.
But instead.
Right.
It's just like my oldest son.
Uh-huh.
My oldest son, we had went to Jethro to pick up the stuff from the homes.
Right.
And he watches me.
Uh-huh.
And he said, you sit down right over here. And I sat down. And then he said, okay, we're going to the hospital now. So he takes me to the hospital.
Uh-huh.
Then they admit me into the hospital. They say, you been feeling this way all the time? I said, yeah.
You thought it was the right way to feel.
So then what happened is that they said, well, okay. All right. So they go into put me in there.
Uh-huh.
But it was, that one, that old son of mine, he watches me all the time.
Right.
And he'll come, because he comes by, he don't live with me, but he comes by there, check me. He know I'm hard-headed.
Right.
Maybe so.
He's spoken. He knows I'm hard-headed. And he'll come there and he'll say, you need to go in there and lay down for a while.
Right. Well, that's good. And it's good that you learn to listen and learning that the world will keep going if you go ahead and lay down for a while. Sometimes we don't want to lay down for a while because everything will fall apart. The guy's like, sometimes things need to fall apart so I can make them fix it.
Right.
As long as you're up and
Right.
around, you're fixing it, and they're not going to learn their lesson. So you go there and lay down for a while.
Right.
So, so if God speaks it to your heart, He's going to do it. But there is that part where, like I said, sometimes God didn't speak it to the heart. We just said it to our hearts, and it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen because it's actually not God. It's just us thinking, well, that would make sense if that person got out of that wheelchair or whatever the thing is. Surely God wants to do that because that makes sense. It's never going to happen because that's not from God. That was just us. On the other hand, sometimes you can have no faith. So I'm saying, so that way you're creating faith. That's not in response to God, just in response to what looks good, what looks right. On the other hand, there are times when you can have no faith and God's just merciful. He's just merciful. And it'll happen anyway. And you know, because God's just merciful. But there are some times he's requiring faith. He's requiring it. That's why it said that Jesus could do no mighty work there, because they're unbelief. So he literally couldn't do anything, because God was requiring
But
faith.
so, you said something that's merciful. I've told this story before when I'm driving home real fast, late at night, 1:30 in the morning. And the cars, every time I'm gonna change the lane, there's not many cars in the lanes. So there's no reason for the car to decide at the last second to block me.
Right.
And that happened about 3 times, and I finally said, oh, you want me to slow down? And eventually, about 20 minutes later, after I decided to slow down, I noticed at top of the hill, looking down, there was a lot of lights. Now, I could have either been in the accident or it slowed me down enough so I can just get off the ramp and go around, because I needed to get home before I fell through the wheel. Now, he wasn't talking to my heart, because my head was going too fast or something. But he did certain things that suddenly I said, oh.
Right. Even though, because if your mind hadn't been on the 20,000 things that it's always on, I gotta solve this, gotta solve that, gotta be here this time, then we can hear God talking, because again, he's always talking to all of us all the time. That's why he says, stop worrying about tomorrow, because when you're worrying, I'm stop talking, but you can't hear what I'm saying. And God's not going to speak any louder. So I'm sure he, you know.
It doesn't make sense for these guys that suddenly change lanes.
Right. So since you weren't listening,
Right, I wasn't.
then God's just merciful, and I'm just going to stop you anyway. So sometimes his mercy works, but sometimes it's like, nope, you got to listen. In this case, if you don't listen, you're just going to get in trouble.
Yeah. That's it.
Right? And so sometimes I'll be merciful, but sometimes I'm not.
Yeah.
And same thing with faith. Sometimes you don't need faith, and my mercy's going to carry you through. And sometimes this is only going to happen with faith. Otherwise, I'm not going to do anything. So,
It's just like,
yes, sir.
as a young person, I was in the military, and I'm driving down, I've been out partying real good, and so then I'm going back to the base. I'm supposed to be back at the base at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going back to the base, and I have 04, and then I'm driving down there, and then I hit the Henry Ford Bridge, which is a steel bridge, and I got stick tires, and I don't have analog brakes.
Right.
And the car starts turning around. And I fall out the car, land sitting down, the car spins around me, I jump up, running after the car.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm running after the car. The car hits the embankment. But the car, I go out the passenger side, and that car spins right around me.
Right.
So I have to go back. I have to go back a lot, and remember all the craziness that God brought me through.
Right. Even though you weren't listening, he was merciful anyway.
I
Right.
was raised up in the church.
But so, and again, there are times though when God's not going to do that, and consequences come.
Right.
Because at that point, he's requiring obedience.
Right.
So his mercy isn't going to work. So there's not a formula to it. And I was just taught many formulas growing up. So I don't know that. So my natural action is to speak against them. Like, here's how you do it. Here's how you ensure this always happens, and this will always happen if you, and there's no will always happen. You really have to be in tune with what is God doing in this case. So you can have a healing line sometimes because God, the anointing is going to be there and everybody's going to be healed. And sometimes God's going to heal one person and that's it. I went to a service and God showed me one person. Not even, he showed me the person, but told me what to say. There's a person here who has this going on with this and God's going to heal you. And this Burleson, who I didn't know, somebody that I knew, walked forward and I laid hands on her and she was healed and I had to dismiss. There was nothing else. That's all God was doing. So there's not a formula. Well, if we have 3 more praise songs, then God will heal everybody. You have to see, he wants us to just see what he's doing. So in this case, once the centurion find out that God was willing, He's like, oh, well then you need to come to my house, because I get it. If you just say it, that's it. And if we can get to that, God, we don't have to, but that would be a great point to get to, where we don't need some big sign. But, you know, signs are cool, but he doesn't always do that. He's gonna make you, it's like I told you 10 years ago, and you just have to keep believing. And I'm not gonna give you another sign or confirm it again. I just want you to believe that. In Hebrews 11, chapter 6, so on the first page.
So without faith it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him.
So there's two things. You must believe that he is, which means he's able. You must believe that he is God. And then you have to believe that he's a rewarder, that he will do it. So the able and the willing part has to go together. You have to believe that he's a rewarder. And a lot of people in church believe he's able, but just don't think he's going to do it. And that's the part, and that's why nothing happens, because of our unbelief. So when I was younger, we talked about God all the time, obviously, of course, raised in the church and all that stuff. But we would just publish the sick and shut-in list all the time. There'd be a couple pages of it, which is nothing wrong with that. But that's all we did. We didn't call them forward and pray for them or anything. Well, we prayed for them if they weren't there. If they were there, we wouldn't pray for them. It's easy to say, oh, sister so-and-so, oh yeah, sister, we just believe in God. Because then you don't have to see if it worked or not. And then you were good, you prayed. But if the sick person was sitting right there was no healing line or anything. Like, well, come forward. I think God can heal you right now, because we didn't think God was going to heal right now. And if you don't believe God's going to do something right then, but where Jesus says he can do nothing because of their unbelief, then nothing happens. And it's not because God doesn't want it to happen, it's because we don't believe he's the rewarder. We believe that he is, but believing that God's going to do something right then, is so we weren't used to that. And it doesn't mean God has to do something right then every single time we want him to. But we didn't know that God would do something right then ever. Like right then. We thought if we just pray, eventually we'll call that person up 4 days later and the doctor said they do it better. Am I misrepresenting anything? Okay. But as far as seeing a miracle right then, that took time for us to think, oh, God might actually do something right now. So you have to believe that he is, and that is rewarder, that he will do something too. John chapter 20, verse 27 through 29. Someone.
Then he said to Thomas, reach your finger here and look at my hands, and reach your hand here and put it into my side. Do not be unbelieving, but believing. And Thomas answered and said to him, my Lord and my God. Jesus said to him, Thomas, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed.
So that's how faith works. You don't see anything when you first pray. There's no proof, there's nothing that says it worked. Blessed are those who haven't seen, but you still believe anyway. It has nothing to do with, there wasn't a, sometimes in a prayer line, so then there's the churches that do prayer lines all the time, and that's fine. But then there needs to be also something dramatic happening in people's minds. So they have to fall back, or they have to feel something, you know. And sometimes you feel something and that's cool, but sometimes you don't feel anything. Doesn't mean God didn't do something so you feel something. So at the Bible school I went to, because we were just stupid. I don't know why they would kick me out. So we'd be chanting, the feeling is the healing. The feeling is the healing. Just to be stupid. Because people, that's what they think, is the feeling means you got healed. And you know, I mean, we were making fun of that whole thought that it's the feeling. Oh, I felt something, and that means it happened. So blessed are those who didn't feel anything but still believe. Blessed are those who didn't see anything and yet still believe. Because faith has nothing to do with you seeing something. So faith is evidence of things not seen. Right? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things that you didn't see. Let's look at Mark chapter 4, verse 26 to 29, where he totally describes how the kingdom of God works.
And he said, the kingdom of God is as if a man should scatter seed on the ground, and should sleep by night and rise by day, and the seed should sprout and grow. He himself does not know how.
Yeah, you don't know how it's working. So it's like you scatter seed and you plant it, now it's in the ground, you don't see it anymore. This is how the kingdom of heaven works. You believe something God puts in your heart, and you pray, and then you can't see it working. Something's going on underground, but you have no clue what it is. But at a certain point, a sprout comes up, you're hot, and you don't know how it's happening, which means God is working behind the scenes. You can't see what he's doing, but he's doing stuff. So if you pray and say, Lord, I just feel like I should pray for that person, that God deliver them, you just have to believe God is doing it behind the scenes. You don't see it happening. That doesn't mean God's not doing it. And sometimes we get discouraged because we don't see anything. We said the kingdom of heaven is like that. You plant a seed. Something's happening underground, but you don't know how it's happening. You have no clue what's going on. Then, go on.
The seed yields crops by itself. First the blade, then the head. After that, the full grain in the head. But when the grain ripens, immediately he puts it in the sickle because the harvest is done.
So he's kind of describing the process. Like, before you get the apple, there's the sprout, and then the stalk, and then the thing, and then finally the apple shows up. But it doesn't look like the apple at first. The first thing that comes out is not the apple, you know what I'm saying? Or the corn, or the banana, or whatever you're believing for. Whatever it is, it's not there at first. And so he's saying there's phases where God is doing these other things to support the apple. So when it finally shows up, it has what it is, but that's not what it is when you first see it. And he says that's how the kingdom of heaven works. There's this part and that part, then the blade, then finally, then you're ready to put in the sickle and harvest. Oh, good, now it's done. So he's saying that's how the kingdom of heaven works. And we just want things immediately. We want them right now. If he spoke them to our hearts. And yet God is working, and so a lot of people have given up on stuff that God was doing, and could have had and enjoyed it much sooner, but they didn't check the mailbox and find out that check was in that mailbox. This is my story. Okay, so Abraham is the father of faith. Going back to Matthew, now we're Matthew chapter 8, verse 11. So this is Jesus after the centurion has said, don't worry, you don't have to come to my house, just say it. Then this is what Jesus says.
And I say to you that many will come from east and west and sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven.
So in Galatians 3:9, he goes farther into that.
And the scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, preached the gospel to Abraham beforehand, saying, in you all the nations shall be blessed. So then those who are of faith are blessed with believing Abraham. So
he's saying, remember Jesus just said, I haven't found faith like this in Israel. And Israel's my church. And that's why I've been prompting and helping. But there are people who are going to come from the east and the west, and they're going to sit down with Abraham and supplant you. He's telling all these people, people are going to supplant you and take your place. And because Abraham is the father of faith, it's the people who believe that are going to heaven. People who believe that are going to inherit everything that I have for them. It had nothing to do with whether you were born Jewish or not. It had nothing to do with whether you were born in the church. It didn't have anything to do with you join the church. You still may not believe anything, but it was sure fun to go down front. So having this faith, I haven't seen faith like this in Israel. I'm right here in front of them and they don't believe me, and yet this centurion believes me. Matthew chapter 8, verse 12 is what's going to happen to those who don't believe.
But the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Right. So the people who think that they are part of this will find out they aren't. So, Matthew chapter 8, verse 13.
Then Jesus said to the centurion, go your way, and as you have believed, so let it be done to you. And his servant was healed that same hour. So
sticking to when God is requiring faith, he says, as you have believed, that's how it'll be done to you. And that's heavy. That if the way that you believe, now, for example, I was always taught in the church that the Bible is true. It says it in the Bible, you should believe it. So when I read, they shall lay hands on the sick and they shall recover, these signs shall follow them that believe, I just said, oh, well, that's me. I'm a believer. So I started praying for people and laying hands on them, and people started getting healed. Because I believe. And Jesus says, as you have believed, so it shall be done unto you. The people who never laid hands on anybody, so nobody was healed because they didn't believe. So it has nothing to do with, a lot of times it has nothing to do with God. It has to do with however much you believe, that is what you'll get those results, you know? And if all you believe is that, well, all you can do is just form a little prayer thing and that's it, then you'll get little prayer results. If you believe that you can lay hands on the sick, because it just said these signs shall follow them that believe. It didn't say these signs shall follow them apostles or them anything. Just believers. So, as you have believed, it will be done unto you. If you believe that all I need to do is say the word and then it'll happen, if you believe that you need a 5-piece orchestra and a choir behind you and that's how it will happen, if you believe that the pastor has to show up at the hospital bed and that's the only way it can happen, then you just have to wait for the pastor to be free that day. Because that's what you believe. And Jesus seems to be saying, whatever you know, Paula thinks that people will just get saved on the bus. So your bus ministry's over though, because you have a car.
I have a parking lot ministry now.
Okay.
No, when I go to, the grocery store and all, and the
Yeah.
guys that help me with the grocery and stuff,
Uh-huh.
and I've been doing this like for about 2-3 years now, and I don't know how it happened, but I asked them, when are you gonna open up your own business? And sometimes they'd be shocked, how did you know I was, well, go ahead and step out, you can do it. God gave you the desire, and he wouldn't give you anything unless he was gonna help you fulfill it. So
Right.
go ahead and step out.
Well, see, you believe God will move in the parking lot. Some people think that God only will move in the church, so it just doesn't occur to them that God's going to do anything anywhere else. It just doesn't, that doesn't occur to them. So, but you just think God will save somebody or God will give me a word of prophecy right here in the parking lot. So that's why it happens. So we put God in a box and we limit, and it's not, an angel didn't appear before you and say, go talk to that person. We have to believe it, and God just says a little bit, and you gotta say, that little bit is enough, that little bit, but our mind will talk us out of certain things, So, but you have to believe, like, you're filled with the Spirit, you can speak in tongues, but you have to believe it. And not, and your mind, and you've already had the experience, but you don't think you can do it whenever you don't think you can pray to God. Again, two different anointings. The Spirit of God comes upon you because he wants you to intercede for somebody. It's different from your desire to pray to God. It's not going to feel the same at all. If you just want to pray, like at night when you want to pray, Lord, it's not like something necessarily comes on you. That's just you wanting to reach out to pray to God. But sometimes the Spirit of God will come upon you and you can tell the difference. But if you're waiting for that feeling every time, then it's going to hinder your prayer life as far as praying in the Spirit. But you have to believe, you know what, I can do this anytime I want. Or God will use me anytime he wants. Or for some reason, you just think God is very supernatural. You just, you just think God, and he does. God's going to give me visions, and he's going to do this and that, and he does. And you just think that's part of your normal, how God uses you and speaks to you. And so if you believe what Jesus said, according to your faith, as you have believed, that's how it will happen. And if you don't believe God's going to do more, he can't get you to do more. Because we can limit him. It's interesting. We can't stop him because he'll just use somebody else. So we don't stop God's program, but we limit how much he uses us. Does that make sense? Right, so you don't, God will get that word to somebody, he'll get that prayer, somebody else will do it. It's, but we could have done more if we had just believed more. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 20 through 22, and we're going to get to these chapters, interesting, I just wanted to go through these verses because of these particular things. Matthew chapter 9, verse 20 through 22.
And suddenly a woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years came from behind and touched the hem of his garment. For she said to herself, if only I may touch his garment, I shall be made well.
And that's weird. I don't know that she'd ever seen that, right? In the Bible previously, are there people who got healed just from touching his clothes?
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I thought I heard somebody talk on this, that one of the signs of the Messiah to come was there will be healing in his.
Right, but
So she might have.
that's saying that she's a Bible scholar and that obscure, you have to
It was
go,
really obscure, yeah, you're right.
right, I mean, it's obscure scripture.
Yeah.
So I know, that person's confirming that it's possible and that's one of the signs, but she's not a scholar like that. She wouldn't even allow it.
There's no way of knowing that she knew of that. In other words.
Right, we can't assume that because, something just said that to her heart. I know he's the Messiah, and I can just I know he's not going to talk to me. I know I'm not going to get a chance to. But I know if I can just touch him in the garment, I'll be healed. Something like when you just felt like, I'm going to be able to get up in 2 days after this heart surgery. When I had my prostate surgery, I knew I was going to be, I walked out the next day. People were mad. You should rest more, but I'm fine, and I know that I'm fine. You can't explain it, but if God says something to you, you just know it. And she just knew it. She just knew. And it made no sense. That's not something she'd ever seen before. She hadn't seen it. She might have vaguely heard it.
But you're right.
Script, but it would be a very obscure reference in the Bible. And again, she's not even allowed in the temple, so no one's going over all the scriptures with her. But something said, he's got power, and I know that it will come into me if I just touch him. Verse 22.
Jesus turned and saw her. Take courage, daughter, he said, your faith has healed you. And the woman was cured from that very hour.
So your faith, there's healing here, and because you believe, no one else believed it. So they didn't get anything. But your faith, because too often we think it's a decision, except no one here thinks that. But too often in the church we think it's a decision of God. I like this one more than that one, so I'm going to heal this one and not heal that one. And often, this one had faith and that one didn't. That's what happened with Jesus. In fact, when he said, who touched me? And then they said, a whole bunch of people touched you. We're not about who touched you. That's crazy. But she believed, and he says, your faith. You believed, and that's why you got it, and it wasn't just God's choice. And so we think God is sitting up with a dartboard and going, okay, that person gets something today. But if we thought, well, no, it's for me, if we can, and sometimes it's just a matter of hearing the scriptures enough that it finally sinks into you, you go, oh, that's for me. So like at the healing school at my Bible college, 24-hour-a-day healing school, in one of the rooms, so they dedicated a whole building just to healing. In one of the rooms, there's just healing scriptures going 24 hours a day. You can just sit in this room and listen to all the scriptures. And people just come, all the incurable people show up. And they listen until finally it drops into them. They go, oh, yes, I get it. That is for me. And they'll come out healed. Because it's like it finally sinks in to the point where they believe it. So sometimes it is that's what God is requiring, is faith. Again, sometimes he's just merciful. Matthew chapter 9, verse 29.
When Jesus departed from there, 2 blind men followed him, crying out and saying, Son of David, have mercy on us. And when he had come into the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said to them, Do you believe that I am able to do this? They said to him, Yes, Lord. Then he touched their eyes and said, According to your faith, it will be done to you.
So there's a bunch of blind people, but they actually thought he couldn't. So this is, again, the willing and the able. Sometimes we think God is willing, but this is too big. So we don't go up to a lot of blind people, and not that we're supposed to, I'm not saying we should, but I'm just, certain situations just look, well, that person doesn't have legs, so I'm not going to pray for them that they walk. We don't even, because when I was real zealous, back in the day, when I was going to Bible college, I was at church, I was at college all day, and then I worked maybe 3 or 4 nights a week. But the other nights, I was at a service somewhere. And then after service, we were at a Bible studies. When you went to the store, gospel music's playing. When you went to witness to somebody, the prostitute would take the Bible out of her purse, and then she'd show you a scripture and start arguing with you. Like, everybody knew the Bible everywhere, couldn't take the Bible, God 24 hours a day. So we were saturated with the Bible, saturated. And so we were just believing all sorts of stuff. I don't mean in a bad way. I mean, like, we just thought God could do anything. And so I remember one time in Chicago at this convention, this person didn't have an arm or something, and we prayed, and like, pictures would come back later, like it was starting to grow. Yes.
Out of here.
Yes, it was like, but we weren't even like, of course, because he can do anything.
Right.
Because it was Bible all day long. So I admit that now it'd be hard for me. I'm not going to somebody with no arms, but in those days we just saw so many miracles because it was just 24 hour a day. If you were lucky enough to be in that kind of situation, we were just saturated with Bible all